Hi viewers and our friends of this channel. Welcome to another exciting session on making you all industry level software developers. So as usual, the most important question first. Are you all ready to become industry level software developers? Yes? Yeah, good. Awesome guys, awesome. Okay, let's do it now. The lesson name is objective C, the adaptive user interfaces and making apps adaptive. So this is lesson 1, introduction to this. Let's move forward, right? Okay, so let me straight away go into introduction of adaptive user interfaces. So we are referencing the Apple developer docs. So building adaptive user interfaces, right, on iPhone and iPad, last update January 2020. So, app should. So, what is this whole thing about adaptive user interfaces, right? So, adaptive user interfaces, if I simplify, right? If I generally simplify what it is, so making apps adaptive, meaning, let us say if you are designing a iOS app, let us say you are designing it for iPhone, right? One app. Now, when it so sometimes the users might use this app on an iPad, right? So the question is now when you are creating a single app, when you know the users might be using say iPhones or iPads, are you designing two apps in terms of the user interface, or are you designing only one app and making it generalized across these different devices? So when I say making it generalized, it's I mean making it adaptive, right? Of course, the answer is the second option, right? So you don't develop two apps. The idea is you develop one app, and the user interface you want it to be slightly different. Let us say if needed in different devices, right? So that is what you call as adaptive user interfaces. So actually speaking, it's not just two different devices. It can be different versions, variations of iPhones, different versions and variations of iPads, different screen sizes. So when I say making app adaptive, it's not just iPhone and iPad. It's a lot of combinations behind that, right? So if you look at some of the Apple developer talks, they talk about 300 plus different variations, not just two, right? It can be landscape, it can be portrait, it can be in different modes, master detail, the split view controller. Um, Lots of options are there, right? And in fact, even different form factors, like let us say a small iPhones or slightly larger iPhones, so the challenge is how do you make apps to be adaptive in. So when I say adaptive, it's not the logic mainly we are talking. It's not the back end. It's the front end. It's the look and feel is what we talk, right? So in this introduction, we'll see how you understand, because first of all, before you make the apps adaptive, you have to understand the concept behind it, right? So now everybody is clear what our focus is, how to make the user interface adaptive across multiple devices. Okay, my friends, sounds clear? Good. Let's go and see. So we'll start with Apple developer docs. So building apps, right? You call them as universal apps as well, right? So in all models, apps should look good in all models, iPhone, iPad, right? Regardless of the display or the size, right? So let me make sure that you can see it clearly. Good. Sorry if the font was too small. So it should, regardless of the size, it should look good, right? So then we have features like Xcode storyboards, right? And today you are going to learn something called auto layout under this, right? So it says your app's interface elements and layouts automatically fit the display. So there's a lot of support coming from the um, design editor, from the Xcode. There's a lot of support coming from the UI interface builder, right? The Xcode, right? Okay, so then there are some important like points as announced in this is the Apple Developer Conference, worldwide Apple Developer Conference, Apple Worldwide Developer Conference 19. They say started from April 20, apps submitted to the App Store must use an Xcode storyboard to provide the launch screen and must have interface that support any display size. So that means you have, when you develop apps, you have to make sure that it supports any display size, right? So okay, then in this document, this is Apple developer document, so it talks about learning about designing adaptive interfaces, right? So let's move into that, right? Learning about adaptive interface. I just clicked on it, right? Adaptive layout is this one, right? Cool. So adaptive layout, so the people want their favorite apps on all their devices, right? It can be iPad, it can be iPhone, it can be Apple TV, sometimes some yeah. So uh, right, so it says in an iOS app you can configure interface elements to automatically change the shape and size on different devices. So this is what we are going to talk today. So how can you make this happen, right? How can you make iOS app? How can you configure the elements and the layouts to automatically change the shape? And that is a question, right? Especially if you look into some variations of it, right? Multitasking, split view, right? Or when the screen rotates, and many more, right? That's why they say there are 300 plus different combinations, if you think of different combinations where your app should support, right? But the best part of it is you don't have to worry about all 300 different combinations, because a lot of things will be looked after automatically. That's what we are going to learn, how we can make it happen, right? So you have to make it happen with some smaller things you have to do, right? So great. And then device screen size and orientation. So it comes with variety of screen sizes, right? And it can be in portrait or landscape, right? That's what we say, many combinations, right? So if your app runs on a specific device, make sure it runs on every screen size of that device, right? So it can be a portrait mode, landscape mode, it can be split view. So you have to make sure that it runs, right? In other words, an iPhone app must run on every iPhone screen size. An iPad only app must run on every iPad. So if it's iPad only app, if you are specifying as that, but you have to make sure that it runs across all iPad screen sizes. If it's iPhone app, you have to make sure it runs across all iPhone apps, right? And then the other option is you can have apps running compatible across iPhone and iPads as well, right? So different devices, and there are different dimensions in pixels, right? Example, so iPad Pro 12.9, the portrait dimension, right? And the landscape, so in terms of pixels, right? Okay, so this is just that. And then to learn, it says to learn about how screen resolution impacts your artwork, you have to look at image size. So that's another story of this, right? So one side of the story is you have components like, let us say, labels, buttons, and stuff like that, right? Text boxes. So you need to make sure that those ones fits nicely across different devices. That's one side. The other side of the story is you also have images, right, in your apps. Then when you have images, then the question is, when you have different screen resolutions, how do you support it to look nice? Because if you have a certain image, and it may look nice in one resolution, but it may not look great in another resolution. You might see jagged edges and stuff like that, right? So how do you tackle that is another sub section, if you to look into, called image sizes and resolutions, right? Okay, now, so this document straight away talks, this is the standard official human guide interface of Apple developer documents. It straight away talks about auto layout, right? So now let me put it this way. Now you got two main things, right? That you will come across. Okay, one of them is auto layout. Then there's another one called the trait system, right? So, so now there are two things when it comes to making adaptive apps. For you as a developer, you can use two options. One is auto layout. The other one is trait system. Now keep that in mind, and we'll be starting with auto layout, right? And then after some time, we will look at why you need the two things. What are the differences of using the auto layout approach and the trait system, right? The trait collections, right? So two different approaches. So now have a peaceful mind and start with auto layout, right? So it says auto layout is a development tool for constructing adaptive interfaces. Of course, it is. Using auto layout, you can define rules. So basically constraints. So we'll see what are constraints when we do the practicals. For example, a constraint is, I will give example. Let us say if you have a label with a heading in your app, let us say you place a label, then the constraint is where do you want the label to be. Okay, how much of a distance you want the label to have from the top edge, right? For example, how much of a distance you want the label to have from the left edge, right? Those are known as the constraints. Or if not, if you want the label to come centered always, that's another, that's a example for a constraint, right? So in auto layout you can define these rules which you call as constraints, right? And those govern the content, that govern the content in your app, right? So that look after the positioning and stuff like that of the contents, right? It says, for example, you can constrain a button so it always horizontally centered. As I said, I said it for a label, but now it says another example is you can do it for a button. So it comes always horizontally centered, right? And position 8 points below an image. Let us say you have an image in your app, image view. So you want the button to come always 8 points below the image, right? Regardless of the available screen space, right? So if that is the case, say you want a button to be always horizontal, is horizontally centered, and always the button to be below 8 points below an image. So those are examples for constraints, right? So that can be looked after using auto layout, right? So it says the auto layout automatically adjusts layouts according to the specified constraints. So as a developer, if you specify the constraints, then the auto layout will automatically adjust the layout, right, into those constraints when certain environment variations, right, are detected, right? What does that mean? So that means now here they also talk the word trait, right? So as I said, I said there's the second option of traits and trait collections. So let's read this sentence once again because that has something very important here. So it says the auto layout automatically readjusts the layouts according to the specified constraints. So example of constraints was just a little while ago. It mentioned there's a button that you want it to be horizontally centered always, and always you want the button to be 8 points below the image. So this is what you want, and this is what you will be giving as constraints. So then what happens is the Apple uh, auto layout system will automatically readjust the layouts, right, according to your constraints whenever certain environmental variations are detected, such as, let us say now you are holding the user is holding the iPhone on portrait direction, right? Like the usual angle of the phone, right? So in that usual angle, the button will be horizontally centered. So this is like example for a portrait mode, right? So this is portrait, and if you turn the phone the other way around, if you turn the phone 90 degrees, right, then the phone will be on landscape direction. So that is an example for a environmental variation, right? So changing from landscape to portrait. Now when the user change the phone from landscape to portrait, as a developer, if you have set the constraints, example, the button to be always centered horizontally and 8 points below the image, then what will happen is the auto layout will automatically readjust the layout, right, and make it look as you want in the landscape mode of in the landscape mode as well, right? So even if the user turns the phone to landscape, rotates the phone, what will happen is the auto layout will automatically adjust the button to be centered now in the landscape mode, in the landscape direction, and also the button to have 8 points below the image, right? Clear? Should be clear to you, right? Great. Awesome. Awesome. It's clear. Good. So that is known as environmental variations, right? In other words, these environmental variations are also known as traits. So keep that in your mind, right? Traits are detected, right? So auto layout can automatically adjust it, right? And when you dig into detail, these traits can go across different device families, like across iPhones to iPads, right? So those are all environmental variations, right? So if the app is being used on iPhone, on lands on the portrait, the standard direction, and the same app if you are using, say example, on an iPad which has a larger screen, that's definitely a environmental variation, right? So when that is detected, if you have set your constraints, the auto layout will take care of it. So something very important is, if you, when you understand this concept and when you make your apps accordingly, a lot of things will be automatically looked after by the system, right? So that makes the life of Apple developer easy, right? That makes the life of a developer easy, right? Okay, so then you can set your app to dynamically adapt. So that's getting dynamically adapted, right? That's what we were talking, right? To a wide range of traits. So traits are environmental variations, right? So you can make your apps to adapt dynamically to a wide range of traits, right? Including, as we said, different screen sizes, right? Or even resolutions, like I said, right? So we were talking about high resolution devices and low resolution devices, right? Or the color gamuts, right? So we don't talk about all these because this is a very broad area. So we'll be starting by focusing on certain important areas, and then once you focus on the important areas and understand the adaptive interface, concept, you can dig into detail into the other areas as well, right? So that was about different sizes. Not only that, when you talk a trait, right? A trait means, once again, environmental variation. It can be different orientations, as we said, portrait or landscape. So the same screen size, portrait is one environment, same screen size, landscape is another. For example, iPhone 11 portrait and iPhone 11 landscape are two different environmental variations. And not only that, then you have some certain modes like split view, multitasking, dynamic types, and lots of, right? And not only that, 3D touch, a lot of things, guys, a lot of things, right? So it says, for developer guidance, see the auto layout guide and the UI trait collections, right? So we'll keep them open now, right? So one important thing in this channel is we are always making you independent and resilient, right? Independent, and we are teaching you to become industry level developers. So something very important is, if you want to become industry level developer, you have to refer a lot of these developer documents and APIs, right? That's how industry level developers will be working. Give me a sec. Adaptive, right? So I believe this is the same. Yes, just a couple of documents are kept open, right? So I open these two links, auto layout guide and the trait collection, because if you remember a little while ago, I said there are two main ways of doing things. See, the one was, I said, auto layout, the other one I said was traits, or the trait collection. So it's given as two documents as well, right? So because there's a difference between the two, but you can use them combined, right? Okay, let's read them, but let's, before that, let's go down, right? So then the layout guides and the safe area, right? So let's read. Layout guides define rectangular regions that don't actually appear visibly on screen, right? Let's read this and I will explain. But aid with positioning, alignment, right? The system includes predefined layout guidelines that make it easy to apply standard margins, right, around the content. You can also define custom. So what does that mean is, uh, when you look at your phone, right? If you take a phone or the iPhone or the iPad, that physical screen size 100% is not available for your app, right? Because some part of this physical screen size is used for system placements, or for system usage. So the idea is, you don't get 100%, right? So you'll have to, specially, you should make sure that you have to keep some gaps in the corners for the system usage, right? So we call it as, that's what he says, uh, that don't actually visible on screen, right? So 100% the physical area is not visible on the screen, only part of it. is made visible, and the corners and the edges has to be kept, reserved, right, for system to be. So what it says is, so you got layout guide. So when you are designing apps, the canvas design editor in Xcode will show you those guides, so that you can so you call them as a safe area, so you don't touch them, right? So it's you use only the safe area for you, and you don't touch what is kept as a safe area for the system to put the system, I don't know, decorations or stuff like that, right? So you have to use the standard layout guides when you place your components, right? So those comes in terms, so the safe area is what is for you, right? And then you have to make sure the margins are there, to be used by, you should not cross over the margins, so that those will not be visible, if you do so while you are designing in Xcode, right, IDE. You have to always adhere to the safe area and layout margins defined by the UI kit. So what is UI kit? The UI kit is what you see in the Xcode, storyboard, the design canvas design editor. So you are using the UI kit. So always make sure you use only the safe area, and you have to adhere to the margins defined by the UI kit. And when you place components like buttons and images, you will see that it's shown in dotted lines where you should not cross those, right? So these layout guides will ensure appropriate it's inserting based on device and context. So they will make sure that so the safe area also prevents content from uh, underlapping the status bar, navigation bar, toolbar. So this is what I said. Like in the app, there are certain sections needed by the system, right? The status bar or the navigation bar, the toolbars, the tab. So if those are available for the app, if those are visible, then if you can't place your components on those, right? So if you got a toolbar or navigation bar, your image, the main image should not cross over, it should not underlap, right, or prevents content from underlapping, right? So you have to make sure the safe area prevents all those, right? Cool, good. So the views automatic adapt safe area layout, you have to make sure, right? So again, for developer guidance, you got the UI layout guide, margins guide. Let's open, guys. Let's open and keep them. So let me put it just here, because this is the order I'm opening them, right? So let me put this once again here, right? You have to make it a practice to read this. You have to make it a practice to read this, Apple developer references, right? So where were we? So just here, one, I opened two earlier, then one, two, three, four. One, two, three, four. Cool. All good, right? So you got some API references to look into. Okay, so then look here. Now it was talking about layout guide and safe area, right? Then before that it was talking about auto layout. So it's talking about different sections under this, right? Device, screen size. So keep in mind these are different areas it's talking, right? Adaptivity and layout. Under that, now there are different screen sizes and orientations, right? Then there is auto layout. You don't know much, but at least there's something called auto layout, which can automatically take care of automatically adapting into different environments based on the constraints you have given.